Hi, and welcome to London's Calling 5 Tips for a Seamless Marketing Cloud Implementation. My name is Chris Zullo. I am a Salesforce MVP and a Managing Director at DuPont Circle Solutions, which is based here in Washington, D.C. And I'm going to take you through these 5 tips over the course of this session. And if you have any questions, you can post them online. All right, so here's our agenda for today. The 5 tips I'm going to take us through are technology, stakeholders, deliverability, data, and planning. I'll provide some resources and summarize what we covered here today. And like I said, if you have questions, you can send them to me online. I will be as responsive as I can since I am not with you in person right now. So a little bit of background about me. I have over 15 years of marketing technology experience. I have been in the Salesforce community since 2010. I've been a part of the MVP program since 2013. And I'm also a co-organizer at Southeast Dreaming, which happens in Atlanta in the United States. And there is my beautiful family and me jumping off a bridge. So if you don't like what I have to say, you can tell me to go jump off a bridge and I just might do it. All right, so let's get into our first topic, which is technology. And really what we should be focusing on from a technology perspective is understanding what our systems are that are going to be involved in our implementation. Where's our data coming from? Where does the data need to go? And creating a high-level overview of those systems. Start with, sketch out what you need to do at a super high level. You don't have to get very granular to begin with. It's just good to have that top-level view of what we're trying to accomplish and where our data sources are coming from and where they are going. So keep it simple and drill down as you get into more details. So from a checklist perspective, is it coming or going? Is the data coming in through the Salesforce CRM? Is it coming from an external data warehouse? Is it coming from other systems? There's a number of systems that you could be using, and this is not unique to any one industry or organization type. We all have disparate data all over the place, and we're just trying to remove those silos so that we can effectively engage our audience where they are with the right information. So one of the things that we need to do is mark down what is our system of truth or system of record, depending on what your preference is, and just know where that is and how it fits into the overall flow and map of our architecture so that we can effectively pull data from, and any data that needs to go back to, we make sure that that data is properly mapped. Where's our content coming from? Is everything going to be stored within the Marketing Cloud Content Builder? Are we building it somewhere else and then importing it? Are we connecting to a CMS or a DAM? It's a content management system or digital asset management. Making sure that those are included if they need to be involved, if we're not doing it locally. Also, again, this kind of goes back to the system of record, is what are our unique identifiers? How do we have one singular view of any one individual? Making sure that we have that identified, mapped, and related on every single record, because that's the glue that's going to keep our data together. And we'll get into that in more detail in upcoming topic. And then at the end, do we need to archive data? Do we need to update other systems that kick off other processes? Whatever we need to do from that perspective, let's make sure we know where we're aiming and include that in our mapping as we build our technology stack. So the next piece is our stakeholders. These are the people, the doers, the people who have an opinion. And we want to make sure that we have the right people involved. One of the worst things that can happen, and one of the most common roadblocks to a successful implementation, is somebody who should have been involved that wasn't, or people that are involved that shouldn't. So making sure we know who are all the right individuals to be a part of our conversations as we shape out or build out this implementation to be an effective launch for our organization and our users. So we need to do some alignment. So figure out, how do we not make this t-shirt a reality of don't care, still don't care. We need to make sure we have those right people, because when it comes down to it, is people want to will or won't want to adopt based on what's in it for them. So the what's in it for me component. So we want to identify our champions, our challenges, our challengers, and anyone who might be apathetic. If, depending on where they fall into one of those three categories, we need to figure out what their sort of like, how much value does their opinion weigh. So we want to make sure we have all the right people aware of what's going on, involve the people who want to be involved, and again, kind of measure that out against what their involvement needs to be, making sure people have the right information, because you don't want rumors flying around or assumptions being made that are incorrect, because that can, again, take you off track and prevent you from successfully implementing and launching your marketing cloud application. So we want to make sure you get those people involved. So from a stakeholder alignment, we want to have teamwork. If we're all going in the same direction, great. If we're not, you're not going to go very far if we're all paddling in different directions. So we want to make sure that we have that alignment. So IT, sales, marketing, service, executive sponsors. If you don't have somebody at the top as a executive sponsor, a leader, somebody with authority to break ties and or provide additional vision, it may be very challenging for you to be successful in your rollout. So you want to identify those individuals and get them on the same page. So checklist, covered a few of these. There's business owners. There are product owners. So you may have the individual who is responsible for the specific products or applications that you're working with. You may have business owners, people who may not be into the technology, but they own the process or the department or business unit, whatever that their role is. Knowing who our trainers are. Making sure that they are equipped with the information so that they can be empowered to lead your users. And sometimes this can be a blend of your super users and champions who get involved throughout the process, and they can reinforce those trainers to roll out education to your end users. Doesn't hurt to have a change agent. There's a number of different terminologies for that. It's not exactly a trainer per se, but it's somebody who's overall keeping tabs on what are the potential roadblocks, what are our paths towards success, and helping align our initiatives with our actions and trying to mitigate risk as much as possible. So it's good to have a good cross-section of these people and teams and get them involved and keep them involved. Doesn't mean they have to commit 100% of their time throughout the project. You can leverage milestone checkpoints, whatnot. You need to kind of map that out early on with your implementation team, whether that's your project manager and whoever else might be involved. You want to get that alignment early and plan out your schedule. All right, so deliverability. Once we are live or preparing to launch, we want to make sure that the messages get to where they belong and stay there. So one of the ways that we can do this is making sure that our communication style or the information contained in our messaging is, accurate, relevant, and doesn't carry any unnecessary, extra weight or just noise. So testing what your messaging is going to look like using whatever tools you may have available to you. There's a few different ways. There's manual testing of, hey, do we have a checklist of keywords that we don't want to use or overuse in our messages? There are tools like Litmus that can be utilized to do a quick scan and basically give you a report of here are your potential problem areas, or flag anything that is egregious, and let you know, hey, you may want to change this. This might be something that will trip a spam filter, put you on a blacklist. There's a number of tools. I just happen to use Litmus as an example, as one of those options. So it's great to utilize those types of tools as you are testing. And this is not just at the beginning of your implementation. This is something that should be ongoing. It's not set it and forget it. Just because something worked the first time doesn't mean that those words or your style will always be as effective. So it's good to constantly monitor and review, and you should always test. You should absolutely always test your content before you send it to a live audience. And the other thing I would say is there's some differences in what testing is. There's unit testing, there's UAT testing, which is user acceptance testing. With Marketing Cloud and marketing automation tools in general, you have a lot of flexibility with the look and the feel of the content, but most applications are going to do what they do. So number one is, from a unit testing perspective, you want to focus on, does the email go out? Does this image look right? It's not too deep into, hey, I want it to go a certain way because that's my preference, from a user acceptance perspective. So the emphasis is really more on unit testing, and that is an area that can be challenging for some testing teams that are more comfortable or have experience with a much more dynamic UAT approach. So it's just more of a caution or just a heads up. It depends on how you interpret unit testing versus UAT. So it's just more of a guideline on that regard. So deliverability best practices. Let's just add some rubbish. Let's add a bunch of exclamation points. Let's make it, can you make it pop? If you've heard that before, you probably want to run out the room. So making sure, again, that we are focusing on relevant information, especially with the various privacy and regulation and compliance laws that have been coming into effect in recent years and will only get more intense in the coming months and years ahead. You absolutely need to be mindful of what you are putting into your content. So I can't stress that enough. Opting in, that's something you should always do. Don't buy lists. Don't rent lists. I mean, I understand there are some very extreme use cases where that might seem relevant for certain organizations, and that's something you need to consider for your own organization. But by and large, that is not a best practice, and you really should make sure that your audience has opted in. They've explicitly expressed a desire to receive your messaging, and you need to keep track of that. Again, if they ask for, if they execute their right to be forgotten, or otherwise want to manage their communication preferences, you need to be mindful of that. It can be quite costly if you don't. So absolutely make sure you honor unsubscribes, make sure you have opt-ins. Don't mess around with people's privacy. So from a checklist perspective, let's stay on target. Some of the things that really help our deliverability be as effective as possible is making sure that we are using a good, clean domain. If you are switching into the Marketing Cloud Email Studio from another platform or tool, you're not going to reuse your domain or subdomain that you've been sending. You should be starting with a clean, new variation of that domain. If you carry it over, that's going to cause challenges for you and is strongly discouraged. Something that you'll need to, again, this kind of points back to the technology and the stakeholders. There is a little bit of overlap in all of these topics. So from a domain keys, so DKIM, more simple to say, you need to work with, whoever manages your email servers, behind the scenes, your domains, because you're going to want to authenticate and tie your marketing cloud investment against your organization's underlying servers and domains. So you need to do some back end work, and so you'll need to make sure you have the right people involved to help set that up. Another thing to consider is whether or not you have the volume to warrant getting a dedicated IP versus using a shared IP, which is already in use. Other organizations are utilizing it. There's pros and cons to both. The number one thing shared is it's already in use, it's warmed up, and you don't have quite the volume to keep your IP and domain sort of warm and relevant. And the reason that matters is when a new domain and or IP come into play, ISPs and the out there will be monitoring that. And so if you have no history, no sending history, that's going to be cause for concern. And if the volume goes from 0 to 100,000 in day one, you're very likely going to end up on a blacklist. It's virtually guaranteed. So all of this kind of factors into IP warming. So you need to map out what's our volume, what's our velocity. So all of these things kind of tie together. And should we go towards a shared because we don't have the volume to keep it warm all the time, because it's a living sort of a living monitoring. It's just always it's always on. It just because you got something warm at one point, if you stop sending or you go cold for a couple of months, your deliverability may go down if you come back suddenly and spike it and start sending 3, 4, 5x what you would normally send after being relatively quiet. That will again put you in onto the naughty list. So keep that in mind and map that out. So whoever you're working with to warm up your IP and domain, make sure that that's a conversation you have. And can't express enough, always get permission. The data, which is a nice segue into from a permission perspective. Nobody likes this, right? So if you garbage in is garbage out. So you want to make sure that we are using the right data. We're saving the right data. We cannot send or personalize information in the marketing cloud unless we have line of sight. So we need that data to have residency within the marketing cloud. In more restricted industries like financial services or healthcare, you may need to go with a more strict approach where tokenized sending would come into play, and that's not something we're going to cover here today. If you're in one of those organizations, I would strongly encourage you to spend some time getting familiar with that. That allows you to sort of mask that information externally and pull it in as needed. But again, I'm not going to go into the details on that. But the point here from a data perspective is let's put in Marketing Cloud what we need. What we need for segmentation and what we need for personalization, and anything else that's relevant to facilitate communications, in this context, specifically email. So we want to make sure we get the right information available. So like I said, what are the things that we can do to do that? So number one, let's make sure we have a reliable, unique identifier that can tie everything together. We want to centralize around the individual, the contact, the prospect, the lead. There's a number of ways we can describe the people. At the end of the day, you are communicating with a human at the end of your send. So let's focus around them and how do we have a clear picture of who they are and what they're interested in. Marketing Cloud is not your CRM, so you are not going to manage a lot of the processes or data points that you would in a CRM like Sales Cloud, Service Cloud, and what have you. You should not try and manage your whole business through Marketing Cloud. That's not what it's there for. Marketing Cloud is your system of engagement, and Salesforce CRM is in most cases, your system of record. That's a CRM. And so making sure we understand the differences between those two and how that data needs to relate. Obviously, being a Salesforce product, Marketing Cloud plays very nicely with Sales Cloud and Service Cloud. So there's a lot of value and benefits to properly setting up the connections between those clouds. And so lastly, I'm going to harp on it because it's important. Compliance is not a nice to have. It's just end of, full stop. We need to make sure we have that permission, abide by any local rules and regulation, and are able to trace the audit trail back to any decisions made by the individual on the other end. So everyone is special. Know who they are, be organized, stay up to date. Lastly, we don't want to come across as creepy, like these fine gentlemen. So make sure we have consent. Not everybody has the same opinion. I don't know if you've ever been on a social media network, but we don't always agree. So let's make sure we have the right information attributed to the right individuals. And so let's try, and it's not necessarily try. There is no try. Yoda said it the best, just do. Let's be respectful and make sure we have the information accurate and we use that judiciously and efficiently. So what you may not see on my slides but are embedded in the notes are a number of links to help you with some of these topics that I'm covering. So obviously GDPR is a big deal in the European Union. Depending on other markets or continents, countries that you may be communicating with, there may be other rules and regulations that you should be aware of. I've put as many relevant links as I can that I could find for this particular topic, and that's also will be available in the slides following the session. So, respect. Don't find out how much it means to me as the individual. There's been plenty of news reports of different organizations not abiding by GDPR law, and the fines, they're not cheap. So please, do to the best of your ability, make sure that you are very diligent in maintaining your data, especially when it comes to compliance around permissions, privacy, and communication expectations. So the checklist, data, where's the data coming from? Where does it need to go? What are we doing from an archive perspective? Our keys, that's vital to ensuring all of the above. It's really the only way to stay organized. It is strongly encouraged that you have a data dictionary for your metadata, understanding what each field is, what's its purpose. Future you will be very happy that you did that, so you absolutely should do that. It's just good for housekeeping to know why we have something in place and not fall back on the, well, that's just the way we've always done it point of view. And again, that kind of relates to the data architecture as well, making sure we know where the data points are, how they are managed, which systems have priority, and understanding how that all plays together. So again, documentation is super valuable in that regard. Planning. As you can tell, this is sort of the glue that keeps all of this together, is having a plan. So if you don't know why it's working when it's working, you probably won't know how to fix it when it breaks, as quoted by Andy Stanley. So all that really means is documentation. Let's have it. It's our least favorite thing for most people to manage. It can be tedious. It can be a thankless aspect of our jobs, but ultimately it is very valuable, and it is rewarding, because when you need it, you will be very pleased that you have it. When you don't, that's when things can go really sideways, and we can make some poor decisions, or unintentionally. It doesn't even have to be, hey, we're going to do this a certain way. If you don't know why you made that decision or why something was implemented a certain way, it can be very difficult to figure out, how do we back out of it? How do we rectify this? Future state is wonderful. This is how we want it to be. That's great. But sometimes we need to know why it was a certain way so that we can get there, so we can bridge that gap and move forward effectively. So, start early, start often, and update it. Again, it's a breathing document or set of documents. You should periodically do a system audit or health check. Are we using these fields still? Are we using them the way that we intended? Has their use cases or needs changed? What do we need to evolve and adapt as we continue to communicate with our audience? So documentation can make it much simpler to manage that, as opposed to relying on a few individuals, and in a lot of organizations, one person who knows how everything works. That person leaves. That's going to be a very painful transition if you're not able to download everything from that individual. So do yourself a favor and do documentation. So from a checklist perspective, as you can see, there's an overlying connection through all the topics. Who, what, when, where, why, and how. Who do we need to be involved, and who are we going to engage with? The data, where's it coming from? Where's it going? What's important? What do we need? What don't we need? The when, that goes into planning, timeline, schedules. So work with your project manager or managers, whoever's involved in scheduling. Make sure you're aware of any outages, holidays, anything that could impact your implementation. Just be aware of that. Work around it. The technology, what's involved, how does it all fit together, what doesn't fit, and how do we get these systems talking to each other in a way that supports our implementation. The why, again, what's in it for me? Why should I care? I know how to do my job. I don't need this fancy new tool. I don't need the change. It is upon you to understand, especially if somebody who is very involved or invested in a particular area that there is going to be impacted, what's their issue? Or if they're excited, lean into that. Either way, lean into your people to help be as effective in your transition as possible. So just being aware of that and identifying and managing risks. And then the how, from a deliverability perspective, again, if your data is awful, so is your communication. You can't expect much from your engagement activities if messages just aren't getting there, or they're not going to the right people. Because as an end user, as a recipient of emails, I can also mark you as spam. If I don't like what you're saying, if you no longer send me relevant information that matters to me, I don't care. I can just mark it and move on. So you should do all that. So some tools and resources to help you equip yourself to manage these tasks ahead are: get involved with the community. So the Marketing Cloud Trailblazer community, it's online. There are some in-person outlets as well. Maybe not right now, but definitely get involved, stay involved, and collaborate. Likelihood of somebody doing something you're trying to do right now is relatively high. If nothing else, you can bounce some ideas off of your fellow users. And so there's a number of learning paths that you can go online and get some information on using the Marketing Cloud, integrating Marketing Cloud, deliverability. Salesforce has its own Success Cloud. If you have a consulting partner that you're working with, they should be able to help you with the ins and outs and the challenges that you may need to face or you may need to overcome. So work closely with them to understand what you need to do to be successful. And there's a few other here, from a deliverability, IP warming. If that's new to you, you should definitely check it out. If it's not, it's always good to just refresh on any updates that may be made regarding best practices around various activities that ensure proper deliverability. couple tools down there, Litmus and Return Path, are also relevant for deliverability. So check those out if that's something you want to add on to your into your tech stack. That's something to look at. Those are paid services, so you definitely want to review what's included and make sure if those are of interest to you, you get the right size package for you. So normally we would have some Q&A. So like I said, if you do have questions, feel free to contact me. I am in the Trailblazer community, so you should be able to find my profile at trailblazer.me, ID Chris Zullo. And then on Twitter, I'm also available as well. It's just Chris Zullo, one word, lowercase. So reach out to me if there's any specific questions that maybe I didn't address here during this session. Happy to discuss that with you online and point you in the right direction if I'm unable to resolve your question in the moment. So appreciate your time. Thank you for listening. Thank you for attending London's Calling. Thank you to all our amazing sponsors and the co-organizers who made this possible. And I'll see you online. And good luck.
Blockchain can help feed more people. And AI can help care for people. VR can help train people. Let's use technology for people to make a greater good in every community, every day. Accenture. New applied now.